Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to invite or welcome you all on behalf of Center for Auto Policy and Research, which is an independent think tank for sustainable mobility solutions for masses. We have Dr. Gurelal as our patron, who's the chairperson of ETCA, and we have an advisory board consisting of experts from auto, oil, and policy makers. Center for Auto Policy and Research looks into the challenges confronting the auto sector in a holistic manner and interventions required for the sustainable growth. The challenges are basically coming out from congestion, accidents, and air quality and the environment. While most webinars we are having day in and day out, many webinars are happening which are looking at one topic or the other without looking at the holistic picture. They are mostly concentrating on how the production from the auto sector can come back to the pre-COVID era without addressing the issues which confronted the auto industry in 2018 and 2019, which took the auto sector into the largest recession, and we had almost more than 30% drop in our production. So this webinar, with the partnership of Autocar Professional as our media partner, and we communicate as PR partner, would look at the Sustainable Transportation 2025 for India, which would also be applicable for most of the developing nations. And we will be taking a very holistic manner, the traffic management, air quality, and renewable fuels, which will be shared by our experts who have vast experience in these areas and will be giving us their unbiased view on the matter. I take this opportunity to also invite all participants interested to associate with the Center for Auto Policy to write at info@capr.in, and we would be happy to have them on board. With this welcome, and I would now like to hand over to the moderator, Mr. Saurabhji, who would be taking us through the webinar. Over to you, Saurabhji.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi. Thank you very much. And hello to all the participants and the esteemed panelists. It's a pleasure to be moderating this session on a very, I would say, very holistic topic. It's a very broad topic. What is sustainable transportation up to 2025? Of course, it's 5 years away, which in absolute terms isn't very far away. But I think given the current situation which we are in, it's difficult to predict what's going to happen.
Can you speak a little louder, please? We can't hear you.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now better.
Yeah. Is this better?
Yeah. Much better.
Yeah. So sorry for that interruption, but as I was saying, it would be. I think this topic is a very holistic topic. It's a very important topic. Obviously, 2025, as I said, is still about 5 years away. It's very hard to predict what's happening tomorrow rather than 5 years back. But I think, having said that, I think more than now, there are huge opportunities as well as huge challenges. The world has changed in every which way we know it. Obviously, I think we've seen the impact of automobiles on the environment, or the fact that there have been very few automobiles on the roads during this time, and the positive impact they've had on the environment. So clearly there is a a lot to be done on that front. I think there's a lot that's been spoken about it in the past, but I think what we have today is a very good panel which will look at the entire holistic side of transportation vis-a-vis the safety issues, alternate energy issues, and the overall environment and ecosystem that we are living in right now, and how we can go towards a sort of sustainable future going forward. So without much ado, I would like to introduce my very eminent panelists. We have with us Dr. Rohit Baluja. For many, he needs no introductions. He's been the driving force behind the ITRTE, which is the Institute of Road Transport, Traffic and Education. He's been very much a man behind safety. He's a member at the United Nations Road Safety Global Collaborations, and at the IRT's observer at the United Nations Global Forum for Road Traffic Safety. So a very, very man at the cutting edge of road safety. We'll be starting off with him for a presentation. But I'd like to move on to the next panelist, which is Mr. Niranjan Raje. And Mr. Raje has been in the oil and energy sector. He's had a lot of experience over there. He joined British Petroleum in London. He returned to India and joined the Indian Oil Corporation in 1972. He's been associated with Indian Oil's R&D since its inception. So a lot of technical experience Mr. Raje will be bringing, and this 35 years of experience, he's worked on a lot of important projects on fuel quality, auto emissions, alternative fuels, which have been initiated by various government agencies. We have with us Mr. Das also, who is joining us. Mr. Das also has a PhD in mechanical engineering. And again, his areas of research are centered around the development of alternative fuel low emission vehicles. He has supervised 34 PhD theses and 77 MTech projects. So really very, very astute technical person, and published more than 80 research papers in various international and national journals. So he's had a lot of international assignments, and we'll be looking forward to Mr. Das sharing his views on the subject. And our last panelist is we have Mr. Jai Uppal. He was a former director of the Indian Federation of Green Energy, former Secretary General of the Samyak Vikas Sanstha, a senior advisor to many organizations, including the Center for Alternate Research, Energy Research, and many other organizations. So his professional career has spanned 45 years. He's carried out many assignments and projects in India, abroad, including government ministries and related organizations. He's taught courses, he's written a large number of articles, and he's been invited to make presentations on green and renewable energy, environment, sustainability in India and abroad. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantastic panel, very experienced panel. I think collectively the total experience may be over 150 years. So I think a lot to learn with them. And I think to kick this off, I would like to kick this off with starting off with Mr. Baluja, because on the topic of road safety, clearly there is a direct correlation between a lockdown and road safety, which we'd be happy to hear from him. And really how this, how transportation going forward, moving towards 2025, taking a few of the lessons we've already learned in these challenging times, how we can learn from them and go forward for the future. So Mr. Baluja, over to you. Look forward to your comments and thoughts.
Many greetings to all our participants and Mr. Surabji for chairing this, for introducing us. I will straight away go into the area of traffic management. And the automobile sector and oil sector and pollution is actually my forte, but straight into what is believed as we go to the Supreme Court, the Green Committees, everybody wants to say that it is the atmospheric pollution which is coming from the automobile. But do we do something that the automobiles create pollution? Is there something to do with traffic and traffic management? That also I'll include in my presentation along with the issues we are raising here. So here comes the fact that we all know this factor that road fatalities have been on the rise. At the United Nations, India was amongst the 100 nations in 2010 who believed that in the next 10 years we'll bring down the road fatalities by 50%. And from 134, we had assured United Nations that we'll come down to 65,000 or 70,000. But in fact, we have gone up to 151,000. It is just spiraled up in spite of all efforts made by the government. Then you come down to see that who, where, and what states, and you see here that states like Uttar Pradesh, almost like 22,000 fatalities, and the progressive states like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, actually showing a huge amount of. Is these fatalities really tabulated? Is the data trustworthy? So at the World Health Organization, which is now looking into the global road safety field, it says, no, India is reporting half of its fatalities and half of its injuries. And they said that India is 300,000 people dying, not 150. And India represents 23% of the global problem, which means that 23% of the global fatalities are actually occurring in India. And if you look into 23% means 820 innocent lives were lost in road accidents every single day till 20th of March. And once the lockdowns happened, fatalities almost has spiraled down to less than, it must be not more than 50 to 60 a day or even less, but we haven't got any data. But 820 was the figure we were talking about. But who were actually dying every day it was mostly the young people. And so you see that the amount of young people who were dying were very big. 57% of the people who were dying were less than 35 years of age. But beyond that, the big worry was 2.6 million serious injuries. 26 lakh serious injuries is something which we don't know what would actually happen to them, who would be still living and who would never be able to work, and how many families would get into poverty was something which we have no data, nothing to talk about. But today when you look into a traffic, this is Delhi. Now, if you see Delhi, in the eastern part of Delhi, anybody would say that is this traffic management? Is there something which is sanity? And so what is the sanity about? And then you come down not only to Delhi, you come down to any of these cities, go to any state. Don't look at the best parts of it, but look at the problematic issues. We have an issue with traffic management. So traffic management has actually failed us. The traffic management has not been defined. We have no responsibilities of traffic management, and police being the visible face onto the road, the police is considered to be traffic managers. And so road authorities fail to do, transport departments fail to do, and so police authorities, and that's why nothing works. Now, but what is happening with the vehicles? Now, if you look into the vehicle, we have now growth of vehicles with 8 to 10% per annum. We have about 250 million vehicles registered in India at this moment. And we speak about 3 million vehicles, but please look into the breakup of the vehicles. And you see that 74% are power two-wheelers, 74%. Now, this doesn't take the non-motorized traffic. This 215 million is only motorized traffic. And if you look into the area where how many buses are there, so buses are just 0.8%, much less than what it is, which actually shows the fact that we have a totally missing public transportation system. And that is the reason why 74% are two-wheelers and growing at 10% an annum. So what happens with public transportation? I mean, if you see that it is traffic jams, huge traffic jams, snarls, missing junction management. There is nothing called junction management. Wherever we have traffic jams, we want to build flyovers, and when flyovers are built, again, you have the same problem coming in of again traffic jams. Now you go anywhere. Now this was when I was stuck at Guwahati, and you go into any city, you find mismanagement and traffic jams. Now, does this not cause pollution? What is it? I mean, is this also responsible or not responsible? So let us look into one city. This is Kanpur, one of your newer coming cities, and you look into the pedestrianization. Look into the planning we do for pedestrians. Is this traffic management, and is this what we look forward to? So I just I'm not a part of your ideal system that you have more of automobiles and the oil, and so I just came in between to say that there is something majorly wrong. And what has gone majorly wrong is that we have not planned for traffic management, transportation management. We are trying to bring in technology by ITS, but we haven't yet got the first basics of the first 20 steps of what is traffic management. So I would like to sum up by utilizing this forum to say that what India has gone wrong is that everything is left to the consultants to come and tell us, the governments. I mean, the transport departments do not prepare a transportation management program for the city or for the state or for the country as a whole. And so, do we not move from private owned transport to public? Should we not look at reduction of power two-wheelers? I mean, it's India 74%, Vietnam is 93%, but today the entire Southeast Asia region, we are facing a problem, no public transportation. The second area which we need to build capacity is traffic engineering. Once again, you see, signals are installed in Delhi, for example, by the traffic police. Road markings are done by the municipal corporation. The signs are put up by the public works department, and there is no coordination. They don't understand what sign, signal, road marking means. And so what you talk about traffic engineering, traffic engineering is not a degree, not a subject in most of our colleges, just 3 or 4 universities, including now we have started the first MSc course in traffic management at our college, but traffic engineering is missing. So my recommendation today is that in order to bring road safety, let's not look into micro level local things, but let's build capacity in transportation planning, move from power two-wheelers and give much emphasis onto public transportation, create traffic engineering centers, and build traffic engineering. And I'm sure we will not have traffic jams. Even with whatever vehicles we have, whatever the road capacity is today, we should not be worrying too much into traffic jams if traffic engineering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maluja. That was a very, how would I say, somber opening kind of kickoff for this session. Yes, clearly, I think, as you rightly said, traffic management is quite a big issue, but I think some of those figures were really hard hitting, that only 0.8% are buses. So clearly a long way to go in terms of public transport. Obviously public transport is clearly an issue which I think will take time to fix, especially mass public transport. Like we've had in coming up slowly, and now we have in Mumbai, in Delhi, the metro systems. But I think on road safety, there's a lot to be spoken about. I think what I would like to do is maybe move on to the other panelists. They'll be talking about the fuel side. But I think I think there'll be a lot of interest in knowing how we can actually reduce fatalities, and if there's any learnings we can have from the current situation which you've had. As you said, about 800 people getting killed in March to maybe 50, 60 right now. That's a drop of almost 90%. So that's quite remarkable. So we'll come back to you on that. But I think let's move on to our next panelist, Mr. Rajay. Who will be giving us his thoughts on, the way forward to 2025, especially with the energy sector. Mr. Raji, over to you.
Thank you, Saurabhji. Good afternoon. I'm going to speak on the specific issue of emissions from the vehicles and in general the air pollution. But when we talk about air pollution and basically to see whether the automotive sector is addressing the air pollution in totality, or there are many things which are still yet to be done. Next. Now, when we talk about air pollution, there are 12 different factors, parameters, which have been included in the National Ambient Air Quality Standard of 2009. But the most important parameter is the particulate matter. Now, as we know that some of the cities in India, like Delhi, are one of the most polluted cities in the world. And the main concern here is the particulate matter. There are two types of particulate matter, PM10, which is less than 10 micron, and PM2.5, which is less than 2.5 micron, which mainly come from the road dust, construction activities, and vehicular emission. The fine particulate less than 2.5 micron are more dangerous as they enter through the respiratory system into the human lung and cause respiratory disorders. Next. Next slide. Yeah, just to get an idea about what is the size of this PM 2.5, the largest figure here is the human hair. And if you see the red dot, which is shown there on the right hand side, top right hand side, is the particulate matter PM 2.5. So this is the size of the particulate matter, very fine, which enters through the lungs. Next. Now this is a human lung, and as you see that the particulate matter enters through the respiratory system into the lungs, and then it gets embedded into the alveolar cavities, and they stay there for sometimes for a few seconds, sometimes for days, sometimes for months or even years, and they cause many respiratory problems. Next. Now, IIT Kanpur has done a study in 2015 where they did the source apportionment study, and the contribution of various, industries and vehicles and all that. And as far as particulate matter 0.2 PM 2.5 was concerned, about 30% contribution is by diesel and petrol vehicles. So quite a substantial contribution is coming from diesel and petrol vehicles. In 2019, next, just hold on. Go back. In 2019, on the right hand side, you can see, again, IIT Kanpur did a study on the link between the PM 2.5 and respiratory and other heart diseases. And they found that in 2016, about 1,14,000 premature deaths are attributed to the PM 2.5 in 29 cities, which has a population of more than 1 million. So all these are mainly attributed, all these premature deaths are mainly attributed to heart and respiratory diseases. Next. Now coming to Delhi, as we know that Delhi is not only the pollution capital of India, but also sometime back it was the pollution capital of the world as per WHO. So what is the situation ground level? Next. If you see the air quality index, which consists of about 7 different parameters, but the main parameter is PM 2.5 and PM 10. The index has touched almost 1,000 a few days in 2018 and 19. Now, above 400, it is supposed to be a hazardous kind of situation, very severe pollution. So 1,000, it has touched a few days in a year. Next. And the factors which are responsible are mainly vehicular emissions, the cars, two-wheelers, trucks, and also the agricultural activities in the surrounding states of Delhi, like Haryana, Punjab. There is stubble burning, as you know, during certain period during winter. So that also contributes. But the main problem is, as far as PM 2.5 particulate matter is concerned, the main factor is the vehicular emissions. Next. Now we have introduced Euro 6 emission standard from April 2020 this year. And as you see, there are two types of vehicles, as I mentioned, the basically diesel vehicles and the petrol and CNG vehicles. As far as diesel vehicles are concerned, if you can see this particular graph, there is a reduction of almost between 50% to almost 80 to 85% in the particulate matter coming from diesel vehicles. Next. But there is an interesting study which has been done recently in US, Japan, and also China, where it is now shown that the on-road emissions from Euro 6 trucks, basically the diesel trucks fitted with diesel particulate filter, DPF, they are having particulate emissions lesser than the particle emission coming from natural gas or petrol engines. This here in this case it is natural gas, but the same is applicable to petrol engine. So this is a new concern. Now there are a lot of studies which indicate that the petrol and CNG vehicles, they emit very fine, ultra fine particulate matter, which very easily goes into the lungs. So there is a need now, as we have already covered the diesel vehicles, and to some extent we have covered petrol vehicles also, but there is a need to control the emissions from the petrol vehicles as well as the CNG vehicles also, and the particulate number PN, which has been introduced or which has been there in the emission specification for 2023 for petrol vehicles, which are mainly fitted with the gasoline direct injection vehicles. I think my suggestion would be that number one, we should have the particulate matter control on the petrol and CNG vehicles, as well as the introduction of particulate number specification for gasoline vehicles also, including PFI engines. Next. So this is a new concern, as I mentioned. The BS6 regulations from April 2020 will reduce particulate emission mainly from diesel vehicles. But what about petrol and CNG vehicles? And now as I said, the new study indicates nanoparticles emitted by petrol and CNG vehicles are equally, if not more, responsible for the respiratory and heart diseases. There is a need to further tighten the emission regulation beyond BS6 or even in the BS6, maybe next couple of years. And particular number, which is already included in the diesel vehicles from 2020, there should be a PN number which should be incorporated in the CNG vehicles also. So this is now, as you see, the recent trend of diesel prices going up more than petrol price, and in some cities, diesel price being higher than the petrol, there is a strong possibility that petrol and CNG cars will be flooding the market in next couple of years, and that is why there is an urgent need to look at these vehicles also. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Ajay. Yes, I think you've touched upon a very important topic, which is vehicular pollution. I think you touched upon again a bit of a, how do I say, something's very much been in the public eye, and that is the pollution in Delhi. And I think again, what the current situation has done is probably highlighted the impact of vehicular traffic on let's say emissions and air quality going forward. Yes, this Kanpur study, I think, it's been done some time back. Obviously, it's a great reference point vis-a-vis the next steps towards improving air quality. So we'll circle back to you. But I think I want to just run through our, let's say, panelists over here, get them to have their opening remarks, and then I think there's a lot to take forward from already what we've seen in the last two presentations. And I would like to invite Mr. Jai Uppal, to give us his, let's say, thoughts. And I think Mr. Uppal is going to be talking a little bit more on alternative fuels. So look forward to your presentation. Mr. Uppal, over to you.
Good afternoon to everybody, and congratulations to CAPR and Mr. Gandhi for organizing such a panel discussion here, and also to Mr. Swarabji for participating in it. My presentation is going to be on biofuels and the role the biofuels are playing in liquid fuels which are used for transportation. Can I have my presentation, please? Well, I am introducing in my first slide, introduction to transportation and mobility, in which I say that there are many aspects of sustainable mobility and transportation, which include the mode of transportation, the traffic management, cleaner fuels and engines, the depletion of crude oil, and our growing consumption. Presently, we consume 42 billion liters of petrol. Can you go to the next slide, please? 42 billion liters of petrol and 106 billion liters of diesel. And we are talking about the alternate energy and renewable fuels, which are now contributing to these aspects. This is driven, the biofuel contribution is driven by convenience and cost, and for minimizing pollution, greenhouse gases through energy conservation, energy efficiency, renewable energy. Can you go to the next slide, please? My focus is on renewable fuels for transportation in India, i.e. biofuels. And in biofuels, you have solid, liquid, and gaseous. We will focus on liquid, which is ethanol and biodiesel. And now we have new renewable drop-in fuels which are coming up, which are called 2G or 3G biofuels, but they have not really taken off because of the costs. The cost of productions are still very high. We will also deal with a little bit on CBG, which is compressed biogas, which is also called bio-CNG, or more appropriately called the compressed biomethane. This is also has got a lot of potential. Biofuels contribute a lot to our society. They provide fuel which is renewable, and it substitutes depleting our fossil fuel reserves, encourage rural economy, and increase farmer income. They also provide rural employment. They mitigate greenhouse gases and reduce air pollution and enhance the energy security of the nation. In my presentation, I am going to focus on ethanol, basically ethanol, largely because it is by far the largest biofuel used in the world and in India. USA is by far the largest consumer of biofuels. It consumes approximately 60 billion liters of ethanol, which is 25 times the current consumption of India. Brazil consumes approximately 50% of this, that is 30 billion liters, but they mix, it's a smaller country, they mix minimum of 27% ethanol to a maximum of 100% ethanol in flex fuel vehicles. India consumes about 2.4 billion liters, which is we blend only 6% of our petrol with ethanol. The Indian ethanol program is really very old, and it started actually in 1940s during the World War II. We used to call it power alcohol. It was a substitute for to overcome the shortage of petrol during those times. The present ethanol blending program started in 2003, and that is 17 years ago. But the progress was very tardy and slow till about 5 years ago when it really picked up. Next, please. Next, please. Here on the right-hand side, you can see the production or the consumption of major countries, and you can see USA is by far the largest. Brazil is number 2. China and is number 3. European Union, if you take it as a whole, ahead of China, and then you have Canada, but India is not really in the top league in this. Now, what is the problem? Why India has not been able to produce and consume large amount of ethanol for mixing with petrol? The main constraint, and probably the only constraint, has been the availability of feedstock and pricing of ethanol. Till recently, only molasses, final molasses, what we call final molasses, was used as a feedstock, which is a byproduct of the sugar manufacture. So whatever sugar was manufactured, that according to that, the alcohol came out, and the alcohol was used for both for potable purposes and for chemical, and leftover was used for ethanol, which was about 1.4, 1.5 billion liters of ethanol was available for blending. But now the supply has become almost 2.4 billion liters. This is because the government has permitted use of other feedstocks, which include, and I'll cover these later on also, which includes B heavy molasses. That means it's not final molasses, and sugarcane juice, and surplus and damaged grain, sweet sorghum, or anything which is in surplus supply. Now, in the 1.5 billion liters of ethanol, if you add sugarcane juice, if you use sugarcane juice fully with the 3 billion tons of excess sugar we have, we will probably get 2 billion liters. We have a surplus and damaged grain, approximately 5 million tons. We will get 1.5 billion liters. We have biomass with cellulosic ethanol. We can use 2G ethanol, as it is called. This, the progress has been slow, but hopefully some plants will come up, and I hope we will be able to produce about 500 million liters of this. So the total additional capacity will become 4 billion liters. The status, as I told you, right now the supply is about 2.4 billion, which is 6%, versus the present requirement of 4 billion liters for 10%. So we require 10%. For 10%, we require 4 million liters, which I have shown you that is possible in the last slide, that it is possible to do it with all the feedstock. So this is a repeat. Can you go to the next? This is not my final presentation, but can you go to the next slide, please? No, previous slide, I think that there is a previous slide. So if I have covered this, if we do things right, we'll be able to, as I said, we will be able to achieve the target of 10% with the total additional supply of 4 billion liters. So the total supply becomes about 6, we can easily produce 6.5 billion by 2025, which will more than adequately meet our demand for even 20% ethanol. Here, the dehydration capacity has to be doubled, and The dehydration capacity has to be doubled in order to achieve this. Next slide, please. So, as I told you, the main problem has been the availability of feedstock and also the pricing. Both of these concerns were addressed by the government of India in 2018. But as a policy initiative, government has decided to reduce the crude oil import by 10% by 2022. And in line with that, it was decided that there will be 10% use of ethanol in petrol blending by 2022. Of course, there were other targets also, which we committed in Paris COP meeting, which was reduction of by 2030, reduction of energy intensity by 33%. The biofuel policy, as I told you earlier, decided to permit the use of all surplus feedstocks, whichever are available. So there are a lot of them, which I have mentioned here, including sugar beets, sweet sorghum. So anybody can produce anything as long as it is economical, it is allowed. And the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs also gave a package to the sugar industry to set up these plants. There has been a rationalization of these prices. First, the prices were increased almost by 50%, and they have made it viable for us to actually produce ethanol from various things. So there is a differential prices for heavy molasses, which is the final molasses. The prices have now again been increased marginally, but it was 43.46. For B heavy molasses, it was 52. From sugar cane juice, which is directly, is 59 rupees, and damaged grain was 47.13. Next, please. So, what are the role of ethanol and the policy initiatives? I have already covered this largely, but how to achieve a target of 20% by 2030, which is about, we require about 14 billion liters of ethanol. So if we increase the sugar area by about 1 million hectares, we can produce about 5. Currently we are using about 5 million hectares for producing sugar. But if we increase the area marginally by 1 million hectares, out of 2 million hectares we have in India, which is for farming, irrigation farming, we can increase our ethanol production by 5 billion liters. And government has now come up with an interesting scheme that the 200 sugar mills which are lying closed can use their excess capacity to produce both ethanol and electricity, not sugar, because sugar is already surplus, and in the world market also there is a glut of sugar and the prices have become very low. So India can't even export excess sugar because the prices right now are at an all-time low. Therefore, if we can, given this impetus, I think if you add up all the figures, we can easily achieve a target of 20% blend by 2025 itself. And that will be a great achievement for India if we do everything right. So I will believe that the biggest initiative the government can take for improving the efficiency of this process is to let the ethanol manufacturers become equity partners or get the land from farmers on leasehold or partial leasehold, so that the large strips of land can be there where mechanized and intensive farming can take place, and the ethanol, the yields of the sugarcane increase. Our sugarcane yields have gone up, but they have gone up marginally, and they need to be increased substantially so that we can meet this requirement for 2030. Next, please. I think we have covered this. So next, please. Next slide, please. The trillion rupee question is also, what is the transport revolution? What transport revolution can take place in the next 10 years? What will be the impact of coronavirus right now? Will it force us to prefer walking, bicycling, sea-gateway type personal transportation, two-wheelers, cars? Will public transport reduce actually instead of increasing as Mr. Buluja was saying, Dr. Buluja was saying, it may reduce actually. And as diesel gets less pollution, less popular because of pollution and rising cost, will it be replaced by IC engine? But the ultimate disruptor in all this is going to be electric vehicle or hydrogen, which is an energy carrier. Will these two take over and then change the whole game of fossil fuels and ethanol, etc.? That is yet to be seen. Next, please. Biodiesel, I will just deal one slide because it has been in limbo since the beginning of 2004-5.
I'll talk to you later on. I'm in the middle of
Biodiesel production of India is only 180, 190 million liters, and the total blend is less than 0.1% or 1.5% of the total diesel consumption. The production is low largely because there is a low unavailability in fact of non-edible vegetable oil, and the present production is only on mainly based on palm stearin and animal fat. So our program, which we launched about 10, 12 years ago for ramping up the production of non-edible seeds based on Jatropha and Pongamia pinnata, have actually failed to some extent. They have not come up to our expectation, and they do not contribute much to the biodiesel. So biodiesel is in limbo. But there is a new thing on the horizon now. A new route is emerging, which is the used cooking oil. The FSSAI, the regulatory body, the food regulatory body, has from 1st 2018 has said that all fryers, large fryers, will not use cooking oil with TPC, total polar compound, exceeding 25%. So when you fry a thing in a, say, potato chips company again and again, the polar compound rise, which are not good for health. So a limit has been set, and it is estimated now that 3 million tons per annum will be available for making biodiesel from this source. Let us see whether this comes true. Then biodiesel will slightly take off, but still you will only have 3 million tons of biodiesel because of this. Next, please. We have another thing which I said, compressed biomethane or compressed bio-CNG as we called it. These are taking first baby steps, although in 2012, the first plants, 13 demonstration plants were set up by grant, 50% grant of MNRE, and they were basically based on cattle dung, but one was a large plant which was based on test mud, and it has been successfully done. But fresh impetus has been given in last couple of years when OMC and Government of India decided that there should be a fixed price. So the price of 46 rupees was announced, basic price, which totaled 48.30 including GST. But I still feel that this price of 48.30 is low, and it is not viable for private sector to go in. Ultimately, the price has to be raised because these are the first plants. As they become bigger in size and more plants come up, efficiency will increase, and then the prices can come down. But Government of India has got a huge target of 5,000 plants, maybe with an investment of 1 lakh crore or more. We have to see. Around 300 MOUs have been signed by OMCs to buy this gas. First time some new plants are coming up, and these are based on agri residue. There has been, this is a difficult proposition of converting agri residues into bio-CNG, but hopefully it will succeed. There is some delay in implementation because of COVID-19, but the history of bio-CNG is still being written. Let's see what happens in the next 2-3 years. Next, please. So, the virus from China has posed $1 trillion question mark on the world economy. Has our mindless traveling come to a halt for good or slowed down permanently? That is a big question yet to be answered. Will the transportation reduce directly, and work from home and digital interaction become a new normal? Will the mode of transportation change? Will the use of conventional fuel reduce? Will the economy pick up fast after the pandemic? The answer, my friend, is still blowing in the wind. Thank you very much. If you have any question, I'll be pleased to answer.
Thanks very much. And yeah, absolutely. I think I can see you're betting big on ethanol. Sorry, I hope, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I can see you're betting big on ethanol, quite ambitious to move to, as you said, around 20% by 2030. And of course, we don't know what the future is going to be, because things like EVs, even the price of oil, I'm sure will certainly impact the long-term potential and the amount of investment that's needed. Of course, investment needed even from the auto industry side, because the conventional IC engines will have to be modified. So lots of questions there for you, but I think we'll leave that after we've completely finished our first round. And our last panelist, Mr. Das, I would like to invite him to share his presentation with us. Yeah, that's the last presentation, after which we will take a round of we'll have a couple of discussion points, and even after that take some questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to share my thoughts and ideas about some alternative fuels. As you know, sustainable transport is a very important factor for the present lifestyle. And the sustainable transportation fuels, next slide, please. Next slide. Unity in diversity is a phrase, which is the earlier slide, please. The earlier one. Yeah. Unity in diversity is a phrase which is applicable in India not only to language and literature, religion, but also to the technology. Obviously, transportation system has become an indispensable part of the present lifestyles, and the internal combustion engine, which form the backbone of transportation systems, have fallen a very easy victim to the dual crisis arising out of fossil fuel starvation and environmental degradation. Many countries have been thinking of several alternative fuels, since obviously when the petroleum fuels were finally accepted, there were lots of work done throughout the world and they were probably uniformly adopted. But that phase is over now. We got to have renewable fuels depending upon the location specific potential. Here is a list of alternative fuels which are being tried right now. And all of you know, Government of India has tried many of these. CNG entered the transport sector in a very aggressive way at one point of time when life became unlivable in the metros. So I without losing sight of the tree in the forest, I like to concentrate my attention of hydrogen, which is probably the alchemy stream. You get abundant amount of hydrogen from water, and upon combustion, it gives only water. Next slide, please. Yeah. The relevance of hydrogen, as I said, is very important because it could be derived from water as well as a host of renewable fuels. You can, all of you know that this is being derived from natural gas right now. You get it from wood. You get it from, several, the gasification. So many things have already been established. And it is interesting to recall that during the World War II, hydrogen was very lavishly experimented by Germans, and they had even gone to the extent of hydrogen injection system. Next slide, please. So hydrogen is a fuel on which the potential, as I say, it has got an infinite source potential. It can derive from many sources. It could be derived, it could be used both in petrol engines or spark ignition engines and combustion ignition engines. Obviously, it is almost axiomatic that a good fuel for a SI engine is not the suitable fuel for the SI engine, primarily because of the combustion characteristics of both the fuels. Hydrogen is good for an SI engine. So, an existing SI engine can be converted to total hydrogen operation. However, these CI engines cannot be run on total hydrogen because compression ignition temperature of hydrogen is about 576 degrees centigrade. It has been tried abroad in University of Dr. Homan tried it in USA and went to a compression ratio of 29 in Cornell University, and he was not able to achieve compression ignition. But in this context, it will probably be relevant to mention here that the diesel engines form a very important part of Indian lifestyle. So the compression ignition engines can be tried with hydrogen on dual fuel mode. That means compression diesel and hydrogen. And all of you are aware that the compression, the CI, the CNG entered India's transportation sector in the metros very radically and has been proven to be a very successful alternative fuel. So obviously we are graduating from the liquid fuel economy to the gaseous fuel economy. And if we move ahead, we find hydrogen at the end of the road because it has got an infinite source potential, can be derived from a host of renewable sources, and practically there is no pollution. It doesn't have carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, smoke, nothing. Only oxides of nitrogen is the pollutant of concern, which can be drastically reduced also. Next slide. So what is important in this case, actually, the prototype vehicles have already been developed in different parts of the country. Hydrogen operated three-wheelers have been developed by IIT Delhi in collaboration with Mahindra and Mahindra. They have been very successfully, the engine system was built up in the lab in IIT. The parameters were optimized, performance parameters, emission parameters, combustion, avoiding undesirable combustion phenomena, all these were developed, and these systems were incorporated to a practical vehicle by Mahindra and Mahindra. And all of you might be aware that this is a project which was initially funded by UNIDO and subsequently by MNRE, which had road conditions, which have been operating on roads in Pragati Maidan for many years. So three-wheeler is a transportation system which is popular to this country in many cities. So that's one thing where hydrogen could probably be straightway adopted for this has been done. And hydrogen diesel dual fuel engines have already been developed by Mahindra. Presently, hydrogen CNG is something which is very specific to India. CNG has already been proven to be a very comfortable fuel with practically much lesser emissions. As they say, we have not inherited this earth from our ancestors, we have borrowed it from our future generations. So we must hand over a livable planet to the next generation. And here comes the importance of environment. And that is why the HCNG, hydrogen CNG blend, if this could be initially tried in the country, and in the meantime, hydrogen infrastructure could be built, then we can probably graduate from CNG to hydrogen through SCNG. And all of you might be aware that SCNG has already been permitted to be used in the vehicles, and I think they will come soon. The other thing is there's a lot of emphasis in Indian context. I like to say that internal combustion engines still continue to dominate our transportation system. Obviously, we must aim at the fuel cells, which are the ultimate. A lot of work is being done in the country, in several parts of the country. But the prototype vehicles on internal combustion engines using hydrogen have already been designed, developed, road tested, and optimized. So we can straightaway go to the internal combustion engine, and the work on fuel cells could be accelerated at the same time till we switch over from hydrogen operated IC engines to fuel cell. And as all of you are aware, fuel cell requires a very pure hydrogen, where internal combustion engines can run with, they will tolerate some amount of impurity and can be adopted straight away. Next slide, please. So what I am personally suggesting, I mean, as I said, it will not be at this point of time to localize on a particular fuel. As has been already said, that the government had the biofuel policy, the government had prepared the National Hydrogen Energy Board roadmap, CNG had already been used, dimethyl ether and ethyl alcohol are receiving lots of attention, electrical vehicles have been given top priority in view of their speedy implementation. So obviously, it's not that we suggest that we only concentrate on hydrogen. The activities on hydrogen should be carried out by different groups which are involved in it, so that by the time the resultant comes out, the total fuel economy could be transferred to hydrogen economy. The production, the storage, the utilization of hydrogen are three important things. Production of hydrogen, as I say, it's an alchemy stream. We get it from water and upon combustion it gives water. But this is probably too simplified a sentence. The technology of deriving adequate amount of hydrogen from water has to be not only economically viable, but energy intensive. And all of you might be aware, presently there are Indian Oil Research Lab and National Institute of Solar Energy have already facilities for production of hydrogen and CNG in IOC. And in this UNIDO project by IIT Delhi and Mahindra, Air Products had airlifted one of their units and installed in Pragati Maida during the demonstration days. So obviously, I think if we work parallel, since the major technical aspect of converting, or I should say,
is everyone? Yeah, is Mr. Baluja with us?
I think he's not there as of now.
He was
Okay, I think
join in. He was to leave and join again.
right. So I think Mr. Das, since I've got you there, I'd like to just maybe pick up on some points. You're betting a lot on hydrogen as the future, but the fact is that hydrogen is a very, very expensive prospect. I think cost, while hydrogen is so freely available, producing and extracting hydrogen is a completely different matter. There's, I know a lot of people are betting on it. You've got, this making news is Nikola, who's a truck maker, is getting into hydrogen, a startup which has got a lot of interest, a lot of, investment also coming in. But in the Indian context, how feasible do you think it is, given the size of our country, given the fact that, setting up a hydrogen, just one station is a matter of crores. It's not cheap at all. Do you see costs coming down? Do you see partnerships? Do you see the state, having to pitch in? What role do you see the auto manufacturers playing? Because this sounds, it's actually the ideal solution, the long-term solution, and the ultimate thing, because you can't get any cleaner with that, and even range is not a problem. Even the issues of EVs are taken care of. But obviously, there's the cost and the whole, the ecosystem which has to be built. So, just your thoughts on that, which if you could just elaborate on. About the economics, because it's really expensive. Just setting it up, just the investments are eye-wateringly expensive. So, can a country like India afford something? And given the fact that our geographical spread is so much, setting up a nationwide infrastructure would also, be a crazily costly exercise. Japan has done a lot with hydrogen, but it's a rich country, it's a small country, and yet they have their own challenges. So, really, how feasible is it? Even in something like the medium term, because the cost seems to be a huge deterrent. And just the whole technology, even from a vehicle point of view, even that's expensive. So obviously, it would start with buses and trucks, the long-range vehicles, where this really works quite well. So just wanted your thoughts on how feasible it is in the Indian context.
Yeah, absolutely. Because hydrogen could be the present technological level is such that we normally get hydrogen by methane forming.
Yeah.
But hydrogen can be also derived from the last lot of. It's not necessarily water, because the other waste material. Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Yes. I mean, hydrogen can adopt the technology from waste to wealth. In fact, when we are running these three-wheelers in Pragati Maidan, a team had come from UNIDO, and they said that a particular group is deriving hydrogen from the West. I think such technologies have to be encouraged and taken up in a big way so that they compete with the existing technology, which are fairly expensive. As you know, the two stations which are in Delhi right now, they adopt electrolysis, which is definitely not the way once we go for widespread implementation. And as you rightly pointed out, in a country like India, the character of the problem is very different. We need it for our buses and trucks which run on diesel. We have been consuming so many times diesel as compared to petrol. So internal combustion engine doesn't really need a very pure level of hydrogen. So obviously, if the activity, I mean, gasification is a very well-known technology. If such technology could be adopted and could be tailor-made to the local specific applications, I think the economic would not be a difficult problem. If you recall, at one point of time, it was thought that the food would be very, very expensive. But now you can think of it. Even, if you recall, before 15, 20 years, they used to say that a mobile is very expensive, mobile telephone. But now everybody is mobile telephone. So once we appreciate the magnitude of the benefit you get out of it, I think that's my personal.
Mr. Saurabhji, can I just add a few things on hydrogen?
Sure. Sure,
yeah,
please.
Actually, hydrogen, of course, Professor Das is the expert. And I have done some work on hydrogen when I was in IUC R&D and even after retirement. Now, hydrogen from renewable sources can also be there. For example, at NICE, which Professor Das mentioned, National Institute of Solar Energy, there is a demonstration unit of producing hydrogen from solar. And I was the project in charge of that project, where 120 kilowatt of rooftop solar was connected with the electrolyzer and hydrogen produced. So, and this is only a demonstration project, but there are many other, alternative ways of producing hydrogen through solar, maybe geothermal or tidal or so many other things are there. So, still the research is going on, and then of course there is a green hydrogen, there is then the hydrogen which you produce and after carbon sequestration also, because there are a lot of abandoned sort of gas fields and all that where you can sequester carbon. So there are many other ways of doing it, but it's a good starting point to see that whether the hydrogen can be a sustainable fuel for the future.
Right.
Mr. Soraji, can I just take a point on this? You see, the problem with all alternate fuels and renewable fuels right now is that the crude oil prices are low. They had hit a bottom. Now they have come up, but still it's nearly $40 a barrel, which actually deters the manufacturers from using these fuels, these alternate fuels or renewable fuels. So therefore, there is a problem because in the new scenario of COVID, I do not know where the demand of oil is going to be. The oil may remain at this level for a very long time to come, although they have said that we have reached a peak. Peaking has been done of oil production last year. What this peaking we have been hearing for a very, very long time. is a big problem for all of us in the renewable energy space, the hydrogen space, because especially because hydrogen is only a carrier of energy. It doesn't create its own energy, which is very important to understand. So if the overall efficiency and cost go down, hydrogen will pick up. Thank you.
Right, and sticking with you, Mr. Upal, you're betting a lot on ethanol, but again, clearly taking the example of CNG, they've been trying for I think over 2 decades. There still isn't a sufficient network, going forward. Even with ethanol, looking at the amount of quantity that you are talking about, again, how feasible is it? And there's even a cost to it. I mean, this will require, the full internal combustion engine will have to be heavily modified to run on ethanol, especially if you're talking, about 20% ethanol by 2030, which will require, as you said, 14 billion, tons. So I think clearly, again, it's just the feasibility which, one always questions, and especially in a country like India where affordability is such an issue. You generally always err towards the lowest cost solution, which unfortunately isn't normally the cleanest solution. So, in that context, do you really think ethanol is a very feasible, let's say, option?
I have only one comment on this. You see, when we wanted to blend 5%, there was a lot of resistance that engines have to be changed and this has to be done and the rubber parts have to be changed, elastomers.
Right.
So many excuses were given. Even now, we are now coming to 10%, 5% was implemented. Then we had a lot of resistance on 10%. Now 10% has been admitted. So 20% has been done by Brazil for umpteen years. So I do not see a problem in 20%. And if we have flex fuel vehicles, then we can, and that addition is only of 20, 30,000 rupees. You can put a flex fuel system in 20,000 rupees. It can take anywhere between 0% of ethanol to 100% of ethanol. So that solutions have been found. The question is the BIS standards and the oil companies' relationship with this, whether they accept it readily or not. But they have accepted 10%, and government has said that it will go in for 20%. So we are going to have 20%. When we implemented 10%, then we are going to. The question is whether we'll be able to produce so much in time, which is possible, but some measures are required. Thank you.
Yeah, and is there a target for ethanol blending? I mean, is this the target what you had talked about? Is that a target which we are looking at?
We are looking at 10% by 2022,
right,
and 20% by 2030.
Right. So that leads me to another point which you made in your presentation. 2030, a lot of people are predicting the demise of the internal combustion engine, or the fact that it, let's say, it will be the tipping point will have been achieved by then, where EVs outsell internal combustion engines, which are going to be on the way out. So in that context, I mean, how it must be difficult to predict and even expect the investments to be made if it's going to be just for, let's say, maybe about less than a decade or whatever, which in automotive terms is nothing at all. So I think, is this also going to be a challenge? The EV, I wouldn't say threat, but the prospect of EVs, and as you said, even going forward, hydrogen, which is could possibly be a likely, let's say, solution in the long term.
In my presentation, I mentioned that this is the ultimate disruptor, especially electric vehicles if they take over. So they are the ultimate disruptors. So everything is in a state of affairs where we cannot predict the future. But whether electric vehicles still, the costs are still high, and whether the costs come down for a poor country like India, that's a $1 million question. For USA, it may become very popular. For India, I don't know, 2030 come down by a factor of 3 or 4 or not.
Right. Yeah. So I think clearly a lot of people have been forecasting or prophesizing the demise of the internal combustion engine. Yeah. But I think in reality, it's not going to happen in a hurry, is I think what a lot of people feel, just because, it's, as you said, the cost factor and even the entire ecosystem has to be changed, which I think would take a long time. Mr. Rajay, I'd like to turn to you. You've got the panelists speak on alternative fuels. There's hydrogen, there's ethanol. You were talking to us about air pollution, and I just wanted your thoughts on air quality. Do you think the way going forward we might have a ray of hope with people, let's say, working more from home, or do you think we'll have a problem because people aren't going to be taking public transport? And as Mr. Baluja, who's not with us, said that the problem really is the lack of public transport, and that leads to terrible traffic management, all the traffic woes we have, all the road safety issues we have. So with regards to air quality, I mean, if the fear of the virus persists, people are going to want to move from public transport to, let's say, two-wheelers at least. And what impact would this have on air quality? And a lot of them are looking at even second-hand cars, because no one wants to put a big financial commitment in these times. Everyone wants to conserve cash, even at a personal level. So what you might see is a proliferation of people trying to look at maybe used cars, entry-level cars, and two-wheelers, which would have an impact, especially on the overall traffic scenario, and as a result, the air quality as well. So, what do you feel, is the way forward? And looking at the current scenario, because it's looks like people are going to be getting into their cars and bikes even more.
You're absolutely right, because at one stage we have been emphasizing on the public transport, particularly metro, of course, it is there, and also the buses, etc. Now, at the moment, because of this fear of infection and all that, even if we come out of this in the near future, there will be hesitation in people using the public transport, so long as they have their private cars, because they would like to go in isolation. So that way, I think there will be some impact on the public transport, as you also rightly said. Now, coming to the situation where this pandemic here is over at some point of time with the vaccine and other things, going back to our normal routine, as far as the work from home culture is concerned, that is still going to persist, because with the experience of many companies, particularly smaller companies, saving on the office space and rental and use and electricity and other things, work from home culture is going to persist for some time, if not in total, but at least partially. So that is going to some extent, that is going to reduce, in my assessment, that is going to reduce to some extent the traffic on the road. Not too much, but at least some impact will be there. Second thing is that when we are talking about the alternate transport mode of transportation, like EVs for that matter, now the auto companies, particularly those who are dealing with IC, internal combustion engines, now they are emphasizing, or they are actually going into more and more energy efficient engines, the engines which emit lesser emissions. As I said, that we already are in BS6 regime, where there is almost 90% reduction of particulate matter, and that shows that there is a possibility, or there is a willingness for the OEMs, engine manufacturers, to go in for producing better and better engines. The same is true with the two-wheelers also. Not only diesel and petrol cars, but also two-wheelers. There are more efficient two-wheelers. So the emission is from the vehicular emission is going to reduce now to a substantial extent, I would say, in the next 5 to 10 years. And the only fact is that the other sources of pollution, particularly the industry, the dust, the stubble burning and all that, and that has to be controlled, and some effort should be made to reduce emission from that. But certainly, I think as far as pollution is concerned, there will be, even after lockdown, there will be a positive impact on the air, in my opinion.
Well, thanks. And with on that note, on that positive note, that air quality is likely to sustain and continue. And as you rightly said, with cleaner cars coming into the market now, we're just getting into the BS6 era, which is a dramatic reduction in emissions. Hopefully, that impact we'll see play out in the next couple of years as more and more new cars come on the road and the old cars go out. Of course, the scrappage thing is something we could have a whole session on, whether that's going to happen or not, which would really help. But we are running out of time right now. It's been, a great session, hearing all of you all speak on wide topics. I mean, ranging all the way from ethanol to hydrogen to road safety, air quality. And, I think the way forward clearly is, I think there's no easy fix, which is one thing that's come out of this. One can only hope that moving forward that, we do adopt a more sustainable path, and hopefully the coronavirus, the pandemic has shown that when something drastic is done, though this was completely unwitting and involuntary, but something drastic as keeping transport off the roads, it has a fantastic impact on air quality. And I think that's something to take inspiration from and move forward to plan a better future for everyone. And with that, I would like to give it back to Mr. Gandhi, our host from CFPR, for his closing remarks and vote of thanks. Mr. Gandhi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hormuz Saurabhji, for that excellent moderation. We are now almost running out of time. So my take on the whole discussions which have happened today is basically on 2 or 3 points which are there. If the auto industry really needs to have a sustained development, they need to address 2 or 3 points. Number one, there needs to be a traffic management as a part of the auto industry initiative also, because with air quality deterioration and due to the traffic congestion, they will not be able to sustain, growth will not be there. So therefore, what Dr. Rohit Baluja said, that traffic management is priority number one and the biggest challenge for sustained growth of the auto sector. Second, on the alternate fuels which have been talked by Dr. Jayapal and by Dr. L.M. Das, my take is that you need a specific action plan or a white paper on the subject where different alternate fuels, because each alternative fuel may not be fitting all the shoes. One shoe cannot fit all the feet, as they say. So therefore, you need to have a plan where X fuel is earmarked for a certain application and Y for another application, so that they don't compete with each other. And that also holds good for e-mobility, where many people have been asking questions on it, where e-mobility will definitely have its own role to play. Similarly, ethanol will have its own role and hydrogen will have its own role. And third, with the current petroleum product scenario, with petrol share growing, I think we need to, by 2025, need to have additional parameters to be controlled on the gasoline vehicles, so that particulate number and nanoparticles do not create an air quality problem, and we have another pandemic on our hands. With this, I thank my media partners, Autocar Professional, and my PR partner, We Communicate, and also would like to thank all the panelists, and particularly my thanks goes to Mr. Hormuz Saurabhji, editor at Autocar India, who has so ably moderated the whole event. Thank you all. And also, I would like to thank all the participants who have been with us, and would encourage them to write at info@cfpr.in so that they could associate with us and we could give our recommendations based upon whatever we have discussed today. Thank you all once again, everyone.
Thank you.